Worried about interest rates, the market, your job security, the cost of groceries? Our next guest monitors all of those things before being part of the exclusive board that determines the United States monetary policy, which then, of course, impacts all those things I just mentioned. So joining me is Austin Goolsbee, chair of the Chicago Federal Reserve Bank and a member of the Federal Reserve Board. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, it's great to see you again, Brad.
It's great to see you, too. And you know, immigration is such a hot topic all day, every day now. We just saw a big exhibition soccer match moving from Soldier Field to Miami because of all the immigration stuff. So my question to you, when you look at deportations and everything that's happening, what do you think the overall impact economically is?
I mean, the thing about the Fed with their set monetary policy and interest rates, the law says that when we do that, we're supposed to look at maximizing employment and stabilizing prices. And those are the only two things we're supposed to look at. Those are our big two considerations. And immigration and the amount of observed and unobserved immigration has a big effect on the labor force, has a big effect on how many jobs in total are created for the month. But the overall, we're trying to kind of purge the immigration component out of it in thinking, where are we in the business cycle? If you see the monthly jobs numbers going down or shrinking, not being as big as they were before, and that's only because there are fewer immigrants and in a way the population's growing less fast, I feel very differently about that than if it's the beginning of a recession and you actually see companies laying people off. And that's the reason that the jobs numbers are.
And the jobs numbers, you bring that up. I mean, we don't know the official jobs numbers because the White House executive branch has obscured that a little bit, but unofficially they're weak. So do you look at that as, you know, government layoffs, immigration, or a larger contraction?
Yeah, well, look, you realize when you have a government shutdown, all the official numbers go dark. So now we're trying to drive the car and you got sunglasses on or it's harder to see. Over at Chicago Fed, not because of that, we've been working on it for months, but because we wanted a more real-time estimate than what comes out in official statistics, we came out with these 3 new labor market indicators about what's the hiring rate, what's the layoff and other job separations rate, and what's a real-time forecast of what the unemployment rate is going to be. So then when the unemployment rate did not come out, we at least had an estimate of here's what we think it would have been. And all I will emphasize is that the total number of jobs has been growing less fast than last year and than previously. But most of these measures of the rates are pretty stable. So I still think that the job market is more stable than it is teetering on the edge. I think underneath a lot of noise, there's still a pretty strong economy.
So maybe these things like a shutdown, immigration, tariffs might be impacting on the edge, but underlying numbers are pretty strong.
That's what I think. The underlying numbers are stable, I would say, and pretty strong. If these things were super extended, if the government shutdown were super extended and very wide spread, then you would start to see more of an aggregate impact. But if these things remain short-lived, if the tariffs are kind of one and done, if we get some other trade deals and so maybe the rates don't go up as much as we thought, then I still think we can sort of be back to where we were before April 2nd.
At the same time, President Trump has been unhappy with the performance, in his mind, of the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. He's egged him on to cut rates. President not happy with economic growth numbers. Do you think this criticism from the president to the Federal Reserve Board has been warranted?
I'm open to, on the Fed, we should be thinking about anybody's critiques of the Fed or thoughts about the economy. It does make me a little uncomfortable, the thought that the sitting administration go interfere with the setting of interest rate decisions. This is the so-called Fed independence debate.
Right.
It's very risky if you start letting the sitting government tell the central bank of the country what to do on interest rates. Inflation comes back. Just look around the world in countries when they start to allow that. Inflation will come back.
Obviously, that's the hesitancy among you and your colleagues is if you cut rates too fast, inflation could come right back.
That inflation. Look, we just went through, I don't have to tell anybody. We lived it. We lived through a massive decrease in affordability and an increase in an affordability crisis that came about from inflation being way too high. And we've now spent the last 4.5 years above the target. The target is 2%. We've always said we're going to get inflation back to 2% over the long run. We've been 4.5 years above it, and the uneasiness comes because we're not just above it for 4.5 years, it's now going the wrong way. You're seeing inflation ticking up, and so we've got to get that back down.
What are the factors? You mentioned tariffs. But what other factors play into the recent ticking up of grocery prices and home prices and everything?
We're trying to chew on all of those. I think tariffs are a big component, and you see the inflation has been most concentrated in physical goods and especially imported goods. So I think that probably is coming from tariffs. At the same time, if you see a pullback of the labor market, that can affect services prices because a lot of the labor supply are for personal services, housing, house cleaning, janitorial services. There are a bunch of things where the workers are the cost basis. And then there's always the housing, the component of housing. The food has... First, we had avian flu and egg prices went up, but then they came down. Now we got screwworm and it's driving up the price of beef. Hopefully that will come down. Both food and energy are pretty variable, so we tend to concentrate on those services, housing, goods as the core.
Screwworm sounds like something I don't want to mess with.
Exactly.
You mentioned the independents because the president does appoint some of the Federal Reserve Board members, and then there are the chairman of the local Federal Reserve banks that all of you have some role to play in these interest rate decisions. But when you see the administration coming after Lisa Cook with some, at least to this point, unfounded allegations they've put against her, they want to replace her. What does that do to the independence of the board, and what's the risk there?
I'm not a pundit or a lawyer. I don't know who would be appointed to what positions. I do know we have a system in the United States which dates back to the earliest days of the Federal Reserve Act, 1913, in which more than 100 years ago, just like today, the country was deeply uncomfortable with the idea that Washington, D.C. alone, or in concert with Wall Street, that they would exclusively control the entire financial system of the United States with no input from the rest of the country. That's why they put 12 reserve banks spread all around the country to come to these meetings every 6 weeks in Washington to bring a perspective that is different from the Washington, D.C. perspective. And we've tried as much as possible to bring independent ideas when we do that, and not be subject to political interference when setting the interest rates. I will say, I've been at the Fed almost 3 years. My experience has been everybody sitting around this table. And it's a huge table. It's like the biggest table I've ever seen in my life. But everyone who sits around that table takes the job extremely seriously. It's not about elections. It's not about Democrats, Republicans. It's all about what's the economic outlook, how do we maximize employment and stabilize prices. And there are a lot of different worldviews. It's not like everybody agrees, but it's a very important deliberative body that needs to be independent.
And also, it's great that we have you here to talk about it, because I think it's a body that clearly impacts all of our lives, our prices, but maybe we don't know as much about it as we should.
Yes, not well understood, exactly.
Yeah, which is why we hope to keep talking to you, Austin Goolsbee.
Anytime,
Thanks for stopping by.
Great to see you again.
Good to see you too. And we'll be right back after this.